Come back. President Cyril Ramaphosa has addressed the ruling party's land summit underway in Boksburg, east of Johannesburg. The summit is expected to explore how the ruling party will be able to address the issue around land reform. In his address, Ramaphosa has acknowledged that the land issue has sparked the biggest political debate since 1994. Ramaphosa says the gathering is to give effect to the demand that was articulated in the Freedom Charter in 1955 that the land shall be shared amongst those who work it.
We are meeting here today to fulfill an undertaking that the founders of our movement made over a century ago. It is an undertaking that is underpinned by the constant surge of our ancestral memory that continues to run through our veins and continues to empower and enliven us and gives us the gifts of tenacity, of anger, patience, and determination. From its formation, the African National Congress has fought for the return of the land to its rightful people. It has fought for the wealth of the country to be shared, for the rights of all its people to be equally and universally respected. We are meeting here to give effect to the demand that was articulated by our forebears when they drafted the Freedom Charter in 1955, that the land shall be shared amongst those who work it. We are, through our presence here, giving dedicated attention to this fundamental task, because the resolution of the land question in South Africa is central to the achievement of a national democratic society. This task we are involved in was so aptly described by David Pilling when he wrote recently in the Financial Times of London that by addressing the land question, we are, in effect, yielding to the inevitability of history. Without the redistribution of land, we will not be able to build a united South Africa. Without the recognition of the property rights of all our people, we will not overcome inequality. Without giving the poor the means to productively work and farm the land, we will not be able to defeat poverty. By addressing the land question, we are engaged in an effort to undo a grave historical injustice. There is a strong moral imperative that drives this effort. There is also a strong political imperative, which is rooted in the formation of the ANC, which extends through successive electoral mandates and which most recently finds expression in the resolutions of the 54th National Conference. There is a clear social imperative to the issue of land. To our people, and indeed to all people, land is about dignity, land is about identity, and land is also about security.
Well, we go back to one of our leading stories, the royal wedding there. Our correspondent Paul Barber is there. Paul, anything new?
Well, we understand that the party is still underway at St George's Hall behind me in Windsor Castle. The crowds are starting to thin out a little bit now here in Windsor. People streaming towards the stations and to perhaps their cars. They couldn't get very close to Windsor Castle itself, so gradually people starting to head back home, but many tens of thousands of people here in Windsor today to try and get a glimpse of the now Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle Markle, of course, and Prince Harry. Yes, the nuptials are still being celebrated here. The 600 guests from the inside St George's Chapel now at St George's Hall, but they will be moving on to Frogmore House to a much smaller party hosted by the Prince of Wales for just 200 friends at Frogmore House. There we're expecting, one of the receptions anyway, we're expecting speeches from not just Prince Harry, the groom, and his father, the Prince of Wales, but also the Duchess, the new Duchess, Meghan Markle, which is another break from tradition. So it has been a day of mixing tradition and far more modern aspects to this wedding. Prince Harry himself is wearing a wedding ring, which is quite unusual for male members of the royal family, and Meghan Markle, though, she's wearing a wedding ring made of Welsh gold, which is continuing a tradition of the last 90 years. That's a gift from the Queen. She was also wearing a tiara that was loaned by the Queen for the ceremony. But the ceremony itself certainly began with a slight break from tradition, with Meghan Markle, the American former actress, walking down part of the aisle alone. Her father not here due to ill health. Her mother is here. Doria Ragland accompanied her in the car. But then she was met halfway down that aisle in St George's Chapel by her father-in-law, the Prince of Wales, and we saw a fascinating service with a mixture of old and new music, and an address by the head of the American Episcopal Church. The crowds here today as well, it's been astonishing, really. It's an incredibly jubilant party atmosphere, and also quite remarkable the diversity in the crowd itself. It's certainly true that the fact that Meghan Markle, who describes herself as biracial, she's generated interest from a whole new generation of not just British people, but people around the world, and certainly Americans. And we understand that the amount of money pouring in from American tourists this past week goes into the billions of dollars, and certainly local businesses here benefiting as well. A pub just behind me, they've had over 200 people and serving a wedding-themed lunch and tea. So parties up and down the country, with street parties being held all over the country, probably continuing a little bit longer into the night.
How much did the royal family spend on this?
Yeah, well, it's a very good question. It was funded by the royal family. I don't have the figure to hand right at this moment, but certainly the wedding itself was paid for by the royal family, but certainly into the many millions. But the wider cost certainly has been the brunt of which has been borne by the taxpayer. Some 3,000 police officers alone here in Windsor, and certainly there's been a heavy police presence with many armed officers, but still not too oppressive, but they have to be absolutely vigilant, of course. Big events like this, always a potential attack for target for terrorist attack, and a reminder of the dangers of that Britain still faces. Some of the 1,000 plus special guests who were allowed to watch the wedding from within the castle grounds, so just outside the chapel at St George's, were victims of the Manchester Arena bomb attack. So certainly security on people's minds, and I think most people do accept that that will cost money, and accept that that does have to be paid for. But the festivities themselves, the hotels and the reception and the party, yep, the bill is being picked up by Her Majesty.
Wow, thanks very much, Paul. Now, coming back home, police in Pretoria have warned of an increase in reported incidents of crimes related to internet dating.